Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Centre for Legal Innovation's Legal Techy Tuesday series. We're very delighted to have you and also super delighted to have Clare Dengate Thrush, the Head of Sales and Partnerships, and Mark Wood, the Chief Operating Officer at Red Marker, here with us today. Red Marker, as you would have seen in the advertising for this event, is the owner of software that analyses marketing content for compliance and risk, and what that all means and how it unfolds and why it's important and relevant to you is what Clare is going to cover with us in particular today. So with all of that said and done, and again, it's a pleasure, welcome Clare and Mark, and over to you, Clare.
Thank you very much, Terry. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Techy Tuesday. We're really pleased to be here and are really thrilled to spend some time running through, share some information around what Red Marker does, who we are, and a demonstration of the platform as well. So I'll jump right in. We typically start our conversations with the client challenge. So this is Red Marker's reason to be. We support clients who are who come into this sort of category where on one side they're operating in a very highly regulated market. So they have a lot of regulation, a lot of legislation to be cognizant of. They may have lots of branding guidelines, lots of internal policy. So on one side, a huge amount of regulation for the compliance professionals to be aware of at all times, which of course is constantly changing. On the other side, there is the tension between these is between regulation and the increasing marketing content velocity. So this is demand from the organisation and the market for more messages to go out across more channels, more frequently, micro messaging, more products, more features, all kinds of things. So there is a huge, and this typically goes up about 15% per year. We see the amount of amount of marketing material that's created for a large organisation. And in the middle, we typically see a relatively small, usually quite stressed team of either lawyers, legal experts, compliance experts, or risk professionals whose job it is to make sure that all of those communications going out about the organisation are compliant with all those rules and regulations. Doing that manually is quite difficult. It's quite time consuming. And this is where Red Marker comes in. We're able to automate that first line review, actually help that review process be done in a more automated way that allows it to be more efficient, more sustainable in scaling, and also more consistent across different groups. So this is what we do in a nutshell. How we do that? We do that in a couple of different ways for clients. We have two core services and then a process that enables both of these, and that they're all centered around analysing digital content for compliance risk, probabilistic risk, as we say. The first of these we call document scanning for compliance risk. Now, document scanning really means anything that's in draft format, we are able to scan and highlight areas that are likely risky and should be reviewed by a compliance expert. So documents for us is a very, very broad term. It may be traditional documents, draft PDFs, Word documents, but they could also include things that could ultimately become TV commercials or billboards or social media messages, PR communications, all kinds of things. Anything that's in that draft content form and needs to be reviewed for compliance, we're able to assist with. The second thing that we do is enable this similar technology to scan web pages for compliance risk. So this is once material is published, most organisations have a robust process of some kind to get material from content creation to out in the market, however laborious it may be. But website content may stay out there live for days or weeks, months, or even years, sometimes even decades, without being assessed again for compliance. And material that was once compliant, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, of course, royal commissions happen, legislative changes happen, branding guidelines change, and material that was compliant may not longer be compliant anymore. Reading an entire organisation's website, especially if you have many hundreds or many thousands of pages, is a very difficult task. So what we're able to do is scan entire domains, anywhere where organisations' products and brands are represented, and find those things that are likely risky or outside the risk appetite of that organisation and bring those to your attention. The other use case for our web scanning is when people are representing your products and brands and there may not be visibility over the content creation process in the first place. So this is when there is a partnership network or a referral network or something, comparison websites, third-party websites, references to products and brands that still need to be compliant but may not be part of the oversight chain. So that's the two things that we do. The way that we do these is the third thing that's on the slide here, converting legal checklists into digital rules. So what this is really part of the Red Marker secret sauce. What we do is we take your compliance checklists, legal guidelines, marketing guidelines, playbooks, disclaimer dictionaries, whatever they're called internally. We work with the subject matter experts over a series of workshop sessions and create a digital version of the organisation's risk tolerance and appetite. So we take into account all of the legislative and regulatory guidelines that they need to adhere to, but also, even more importantly, sometimes, mostly, is their interpretation of those. Some organisations are very conservative on some aspects and less so on others. So we build into our system the tolerance of those risk preferences, not just the legislative base. So that's what we do in a nutshell. So what I'll do now, I'm going to jump out of this presentation and jump into a live demonstration of the Red Marker platform in action. So my screen should have changed for everybody now. We're looking at the first page when you first log into the Red Marker platform. Now we are a SaaS, so software as a service platform hosted on Amazon Web Services here in Australia, or the country of our client. What I'm going to walk you through today is the scenario is if you and I are the expert reviewers of a piece of content, sort of the type of content that we're all going to be familiar with. So to upload something and assess it for risk, we can either drag it on in, or we can select a file. So in my company documents here, I'm going to choose a draft email that you might have received. Everyone's received emails like this across the course of our lifetime from a bank offering us a new service. What we can do here, we have a quick preview of the document we've uploaded. We can now choose a category of rules to apply to this. Of course, we'll know that there are different rules that apply in different circumstances. For example, what you're allowed to say in a blog post or in a direct mailer like this, a direct email to an existing customer, is quite different from what you can say on the side of a bus as it drives past. So the channel, lots of elements go into the types of requirements that may be required for this. So this one is talking about deposits. So what I'm going to choose here, excuse me, is the term deposit option for this set of requirements. So what the platform's doing now is it's actually reading that document and applying the risk tolerance of our organisation, my company in this demonstration, and assessing whether or not there are things that have failed the compliance threshold. Now this one has got a number of them. So what we can do in this instance, the first thing we can do is we can see on the side here, each one of these is a requirement that has not yet been satisfied by this piece of content. We can expand each one of these and see in context here why this phrase has been identified as likely non-compliant. What we do in this instance as the expert reviewer is we can see, okay, this message contains a term deposit rate. We need to state when the interest is paid. So this is very specific to the industry, very specific to this type of content. The rules that we build for our clients are all like this. They're all very customized to the client and to the product. We can get additional feedback around what we should do in this instance. And we'll get this sort of information with every time something fails to meet that compliance threshold, because the platform is really designed to do three things. It's designed to tell you what's likely wrong with the document, where it's wrong in that document, and finally, most importantly, how to fix it. So that's what the platform's doing right here. We're able to see in context here, this is the phrase that is found to be likely non-compliant. You've heard about my bank's great range of term deposits with great rates, balances starting from 125,000. So we can say, okay, we can make an assessment here. Are we okay with this? Are we not okay with this? And what should we do? We can get additional feedback from the platform. The message appears to refer to a term deposit rate without stating when the interest is paid. Now, what do we do about that? Update your message to state when the interest is paid. So this is very clear feedback that we can give to the content authors, marketing, product, whoever is going to be the ultimate publisher of this. with our compliance feedback right in here. Now, we actually don't even need to do anything further. This is all pre-annotated for us. We don't need to mark it up. We don't need to add any additional comments. It's all done here for us. Of course, we can add additional comments. If you wanted to say, hey, I don't like that this is black, I want to change it to a different color. Of course, you can do that. You can add additional comments in here as well. In addition to assessing the text that's on this document, we also do optical character recognition on the whole document, which means we're able to pull out words from images. And we're also able to assess whether the content of an image itself is likely risky. And in some instances, that's quite country specific or region specific. For example, in the USA, they have a rule around actual depictions of money. So that would, in the US, fire as being likely non-compliant. Here, showing this type of money is okay. So it hasn't fired. So there's all sorts of things around looking for not just words and pictures, but the combination of terms and phrases in this context. And that as a whole creates something that is likely risky. Of course, we can find just things like high risk words, best, cheap, free, all that kind of stuff. But it's far more powerful when we're able to teach it actually the tolerance and understand what the circumstances and the context that creates risk. So that's what we do. So from here, we would work through each one of these. If we thought in this instance, actually, here's the disclaimer here. So the platform has picked up that given the content of this information, the disclaimer that's in this document is not quite right. And it gives you the actual disclaimer here as well. So you can put it, it's already annotated straight in there. But if we thought in this instance, actually, I'm okay with this variation, you can hit past and say this passes the compliance test for me. And you can put in some justification here. Now, this is really important in terms of what we do, what we use for our supervised machine learning in the background for these requirements, but also it gives the client a really solid visibility and structured data set on why people are taking actions in here, why they're making these compliance choices, and why they're making these decisions to either override the platform or not. So it's really valuable data to say, is there someone in the compliance function somewhere who knows something we don't, if they're always hitting past on something, or is there perhaps an opportunity for some training somewhere in there? Does one team maybe not apply the risk appetite of the organisation correctly? So all this information we use in a number of different ways. Everything is gathered together and stored as structured data that, of course, is accessible by the users and management at any time through the platform. So what we would do, I'll just click out of that one. What we would do in a real instance, we'd work through each one of these and decide, is this risky, or am I okay with this? And then, of course, we need to do something about it. So if we're not the person who is going to fix this content ourselves, which most of the time the compliance people are not the copywriters, we need to share this information with them. So there's a couple of ways we can do that. If, for example, like this one, there are many different items that need to be assessed, we could automatically, or really quickly, send back an audit report to the content author. Now, this is effectively just a list of things that need to be fixed. Like, hey guys, you haven't even tried. We've been through this before. Have another crack. So that's the first thing you're able to do, which is very, very basic. To send them something that's more interesting and a bit more interactive, we can share this annotated PDF with them. So that's what I'm opening up now. Of course, if they have access to the platform as well, if they are also a RedMarker user, they'll be able to log in and see this information instantly. There is workflow in here to communicate, to send messages to each other. I could mark this as reviewed and then send it to Mark, and then he can send it back to me, all that kind of thing. What I'm going to show you here, though, let me just drag this across into my other screen so you can see. Now, this is regular Adobe, not even a paid version, just the free one. I've opened up that PDF. Now, on the side here, one of the regular standard Adobe functions is the comment function here. If I expand and open the comments of this PDF, we'll be able to see all of the annotations that were already pre-done for us that the RedMarker platform did, plus any additional comments that you put in here too. So the person whose job it is to make this less risky, they have all of that feedback right there. We didn't have to type a thing. Of course we can add things, but we didn't have to do anything at all. It's really, really easy. So this information is all available to go back to. We have reporting at a document level. We also have reporting at a higher level. If we jump into the performance section here, we're able to see and track really what's happening in that compliance function of the business. We can track it on websites, or I'll jump onto documents because that's what we've been looking at just now. We can track it over time and down into an individual user level. So we're able to see over time how many documents we're scanning, how many risks we're finding, how many current active rules. This is how many requirements we're looking for right now, and how many seconds per document. So this is, can give you an idea of the speed at which you're able to actually get through this work. So you can drill down into these and track the trends over time. Of course, this can all be downloaded as well should you need to export it for other company reports. So what the platform, what we're doing with all of this information, we want to make sure we have a really lovely, really smooth user experience for the people who are day-to-day reviewing this content, but also get some really significant data out of it, so the compliance and marketing and legal and other business functions have a really clear picture of the performance of that compliance value chain. So what I'm going to do now is jump out of the platform and back into the other presentation notes because I have a couple of extra things on there. So what I'm going to talk through here is how we actually go about doing this for clients and a little bit about who we do this for. So the typical clients for us, actually we don't really have any typical clients. Every project we do is very different from the one before, but the industries that we support fall into that category of operating, like I said before, in a highly regulated market who create a lot of content that's going to be read by somebody else. The typical industries we work with are banking and finance, insurance, superannuation, telecommunications, under normal circumstances, airlines, pharmaceuticals, particularly overseas as well. So there's lots of different industries that fall into that category who need some support in terms of automation around marketing content review. The way we normally break it down, these clients are usually quite large and so have lots of different products, lots of different regions, and it can feel a little bit overwhelming to change anything, let alone try and automate an entire function. So what we do is we break it down into some more manageable chunks. What we typically do is we work with someone to figure out with them what is something that's high risk or high volume. So it may be something high risk might be the websites that they're not actually monitoring at all. We're able to really quickly come on in and assist something that has been high risk in the past and bring some security there. What we might, or something that's high volume, they may be moving to social media when they haven't really had a strong presence before. So rather than having an email newsletter going out once a quarter, they're now creating content for multiple channels that's going out every day. So they've had a huge increase in the type of content they're creating. But there's all sorts of different examples. Whatever it is, the platform is industry agnostic. It doesn't mind at all what industry it is or what types of requirements. So we'll figure out what's high risk and high volume and start with that to be project one with a client. So we'll scope that out with them and figure out how many requirements are going to be needed for that part of the industry, for that part of their product line or whatever it is. The second thing that we'll do is we'll create a blueprint of those requirements in digital form. So this is our rule design and building. So this takes as long as, depending on how many requirements they have. One client that we've did work for a number of years only had one requirement. Another one of ours has over 700 and everybody else is sort of in the middle. So we work with them to figure out what's going to be most appropriate for that part of the business. Then we'll build those rules and we'll test them. We go through what we call a desktop validation and optimization session. So we take a couple of samples of their material, usually 5 or so that are compliant or some risky and non-risky. One of the neat things about the red marker operating systems, our back-end ones, we don't need a huge amount of data to train our platform. We've been doing this for almost 7 years. So our models, our machine learning models, natural language processing, and AI models have been trained over that entirety of those 7 years to be incredibly smart and really good at picking up risk. What we do is we put a layer on top of that, which is organization specific. The reason that, so it's much quicker for us to build specific requirements for each client project. The other reason that's important for us to do it that way is if someone's coming out with a new product or they are new to the market or there is a new piece of legislation come out, they may not have a huge amount of data to rely on to train those models. So we want to make sure we can build requirements that will find risk in a really high performant way without having to need a data lake to train everything. We do that training on the inside all the time. And every client that we have, whether they're new or if they've been with us from the beginning, they all get the benefit of that ongoing training. So during this optimization session, we typically will make sure that those new rules that we built are high performant for that client project. Then we normally do a pilot And then after a couple of weeks or so of having a bit of a play with it, we'll hand over the keys and go live. What we do after that, we have a very structured process around our client services as well. It's not set and forget. We want to make sure that the rules, the requirements that we build in here are almost a living, breathing member of the team. The legislation doesn't sit still. The requirements shouldn't sit still either. So what we do is we have regular sessions, usually quarterly, sometimes as frequently as weekly, excuse me, in the early stages to make sure that we're gathering the data and sharing it with the organisation in a really meaningful and timely way. What we do with that information as well, we use that time with the client to say, these are all the actions the platform's been taking. This is all the interaction that your users have been having with it. Would you like to remove any outliers from here? And what information from this would you like the platform to learn from? This is part of the supervised machine learning model that we operate. We want to make sure that no individual user is going to accidentally train the appetite of the platform away from the organization's overall preferences. So we do that in a very controlled way. It still will learn automatically, but we effectively screen that data going in to make sure it's exactly what that organization is happy to learn from. So that's what we do on an ongoing basis. And then we'll effectively repeat this process for project 2, project 3. We can build into other systems as well. We have an open API around the RedMarker platform, which allows us to connect with other software systems that also have open API structures, such as significant workflow tools, design tools, data tools, all sorts of interesting things. So we do that on a client-by-client need basis. The final thing that I would like to share with you are a couple of the benefits that our clients see usually very quickly. So our clients see all sorts of interesting benefits, and everyone comes up with a new one, which I really love. But 3 that our clients see really quickly when they're implementing RedMarker to help them with their reviews, firstly is an increase in productivity. Some clients of ours that we've been doing some work with, sometimes it can take as long as a month to get a piece of content back and forward and pinging around like a table tennis thing to get back from compliance and out to market. So and mostly it's not that long, but we can significantly increase the turnaround speed. So material gets out much more quickly. The second thing that we're able to do really quickly is reduce the risk. Most organizations, by the time they've reached this point where there is simply too much material to review, they come to a point where you can either hire more compliance people or take a risk-based approach. Now, a risk-based approach usually means picking the things that are likely high risk and hope that everything in the middle is compliant as well. Whereas when you're using the RedMarker platform, we're able to look at everything. We can scan every web page. You have the capacity to scan every document. It's unlimited document scanning with us. So you're able to reduce risk because you're able to simply look at everything when you may not have been able to before. The third thing is to enable some consistency across the compliance experts, the legal experts. Of course, we all have good days and bad days. Even when we're doing our best, there is always going to be some subjectivity when we're doing this kind of analysis. And when you throw in a few extra departments like marketing and product and management, there can be a lot of subjective opinions around what's compliant and what's not on any given day. So having an automated system which has effectively a single source of truth of those compliance requirements, it's really easy to see what the baseline is and see if there are any outliers or strays away. So enabling that consistency across the whole compliance value chain as a whole is a really big one as well. So Terry, I might hand over to you if there are any questions or if there's anything we could add.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much, Claire. And Mark, I know you're going to jump in at this point as well. Folks, if you have any questions, just again direct you to that Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Please feel free to submit them. I have a few for you, if I may ask them of you. I guess firstly, kicking off with a typical lawyer-like question in a way. I know that you mentioned that you work with a bunch of people in terms of the updates, in terms of what the legislation is, but a whole bunch of other bits and pieces as well. Just focusing on the more legal aspects of that. Do you work with a team of folks to keep the stuff up to date, or how does that actually work? Because I'm sure that that's going to be something of importance to anyone that's listening today.
Yeah, great question, Terry. Mark, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, of course. I think we've been doing this for the last 7 years, and we actually started the journey trying to codify all of the legislation for our clients and do it industry by industry, market by market. And one of the things we found is everybody says, yes, I want that regulation, and yes, I want it in that, and yes, it applies to me. But this is how I interpret it. This is how our risk appetite applies in this. And as Claire said earlier, each organization has a different approach to their risk and the legal risk they want to take or compliance risk. So, we start with, the artifacts that they have. Sometimes they have internal checklists, disclaimer dictionaries, guidelines, compliance checklists, and we create the risk detection based on those. And then through our ongoing engagement with the client, as new legislation comes out, they can either let us know and we'll proactively build that in, or we have those regular scheduled meetings with the client that then updates it based on the changing legislation and requirements. Because some organizations may look at new legislation and go, we understand that's come out, we don't want to comply with it yet, or we're going to do it later, or we're happy to accept the risk of non-compliance, or we actually are really concerned about it, so we need to make sure we're squeaky clean. So it's based on a client by client basis in terms of how they want to keep their risk appetite up to date, but the platform's extraordinarily flexible, and our engagement with clients, we definitely offer kind of a full service offering to do that with the client.
And I think it's a great point that you make there, Mark, and you made it as well, Claire, and it really struck me that the whole question of compliance is a bit of a complex mix, isn't it? Because it's not really just about the legislation, which probably is often our focus as lawyers, but it is really looking at that commercial risk management or tolerance, I guess, of the individual industries and clients. So have you found that the software in a way has really become an additional kind of risk management and decision-making tool for organizations as well?
Yeah, so the thing about, one of the things we say, and we've published a couple of white papers on this, are the robots aren't coming for your job. And, our platform is definitely an expert review system. It's not meant to replace an expert review, but it's meant to make it extraordinarily efficient in the review. And, we always talk about the concepts of there are things that humans do really well on one hand, and there are things that machines do really well on the other. And we need to leverage technology and humans to do both of those things well. We work with one client, who has up to 700 different disclaimers. And, humans are not good at looking at and trying to remember 700 different pieces of disclaimer and disclosure requirements. And so that's what machines are really good at. But then understanding the overall context of the document, the current market environment, the current approach, some campaigns, or some communications that go out into market, clients will say we need to be a bit more aggressive. So we're gonna, we're gonna take a bit more risk in it. And other times, depending on the market or the timing, they say no, we need to be really conservative. And so I think that's where it's really important that there is still an expert judgment that's involved in this. We tell the client what's likely wrong with the document, where it's wrong in the document, and how to fix it. But the expert reviewer can make that decision and then decide, yes, actually, I agree with that. And we show, the platform's always right, but there is that, that discretionary decision making, which is really important as part of using the tool.
But I guess the other part of that, Mark, is as well that what it's allowing you to do, and I think of this a little bit about how, in terms of how legal practice is changing as well, is that using something like this is allowing the time of that reviewer to be spent on those more complex issues that may not just be around the actual compliance issue, but around what their risk tolerance is going to be. And, in law, we see that with the automation and tasks coming out, and then lawyers being able to spend more time on the complex issues. Are you finding that as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. I heard a really great turn of phrase at an event last year where one of the goals of increasing automation around legal teams was to allow people to be performing at the top of their license, which we see as definitely a recurring theme, and making sure that the ABN is correct on every single page, or the T's and click here to view our T's and C's on every single page. Those sorts of things of course, an expert reviewer can do them, but is that really what they should be focusing their time on? What we want to enable is that capacity to really focus on the things that are worthy of expert review, the things that are super interesting, but also the things that, like Mark said, that humans are really good at, having the discussions with marketing. Is this the way we want to communicate given what's going on in the world, the current climate, the current political climate, whatever it is, those things that are kind of outside the individual review of this document. We want to allow that capacity, instead of having to be bogged down doing really mundane tasks again and again, they're able to focus on the things that are really much more interesting and more valid for their time. We typically see a lot, a typical complaint that we see from people who are the legal experts in this review process is saying the same thing over and over again back to the content creators. There's frequently many more content creators than there are content reviewers. So the legal expert who's checking those terms and conditions or checking those disclaimers or checking that language, they might have to say the same thing back to 50 different people in any given week, which is not very fulfilling. So what we're able to do is speed up some of that.
And I think, you know, that's an important point. You know, with the platform, a number of our clients start out with the legal and compliance experts using it, and then they, you know, very quickly they become really comfortable with the expertise of the review that the platform does as a first go, and then they enable a broader set of users within their business to use it. So maybe the marketing team, or maybe the product team, or maybe the brand team can use it as a first run to, let's get the 101 mistakes done. And then they can send it through for a much more focused review rather than, you know, do we have, you know, the basic information right? And so a lot of our clients use it in, you know, other parts of the business from legal and compliance. Again, not replacing or removing the legal or compliance review, but again, you know, making sure that it reduces the number of back and forths, you know, getting the 101 things right, and also making sure that the legal and compliance team is really has the ability to be very efficient and, you know, operate at the, you know, the top of their license. I think the other thing that, you know, one of the things we do is we have the platform that the way Claire demonstrated it today. You can also get that exact same review, that PDF that she downloaded and opened in Adobe. You can get that by emailing our platform. Yeah. So you can email it to the platform will respond with that annotated review in a PDF document. And so, you know, when you expose it to a broader part of the business, they actually don't have to have a log into a platform. We just set up their users and they can email it and then get the feedback straight into their inbox. So we think that's really powerful because then it enables organizations to scale. It's just like sending, you know, as part of the review process, you have to send it to legal, but before you send it to legal, you have to flick it off to Red Marker, who does that automated review. And within seconds, it comes back, you know, marked up and annotated in Adobe PDF.
But it really is that blend or augmentation in a way of kind of the human and the digital resources as well. It's like, you know, it's bringing, and as you say, bringing a lot of people that have a lot of different views to be able to kind of input on that as well. Claire, you mentioned a bunch of industries that you folks are working in, and I'm just wondering, are you seeing the uptake of your platform more in one industry than another, or which ones are kind of are you finding are really interested and focused on the sorts of things that you can do?
Yeah, thanks, Terry. Particularly at the moment, a lot of our financial services, a lot of people in the financial services industry are looking at coming to us for support at the moment, particularly as so many rules have changed recently. We had, I've had some really interesting conversations with people in the superannuation and insurance space, more than usual, and a few more in the financial advice space as well, given that there are temporary changes to much of the legislation, and the way that that's communicated online is very important. And so much communication was going out over the last few months while people were trying to support their clients, support the public, support other customers, at the same time as maintain their business. And so there's been a lot of COVID messaging which is needed to be compliant and is new. And so there was a big rush to help make sure we're able to, that all that communication is correct. And we're able, one of the things that we do, I touched on briefly with our web scanning service, we do one-off reports on that, kind of like an audit on the website. So there's definitely been some increased interest in making sure the comms that all went out in a big rush is compliant on their own websites, making sure that that is meeting the new COVID communications requirements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's been really interesting. We have, and pharmaceuticals have also been, pharmaceutical companies and health insurance has also been particularly interested around the last few months.
But, you know, Terry, to that, you know, as Claire said, you know, the platform's industry agnostic and, you know, kind of country agnostic as well. And so we've seen, you know, more clients in the automotive space, in the funds management space, in the health, and, you know, global publishing companies. Like, you know, it's, you know, anywhere where there's, you know, they have large amounts of content and are highly regulated, or need to, you know, even not highly regulated, but have some very specific things they need to ensure are there in large amounts of content, are the types of organizations that it resonates with. And so, you know, while our heritage is financial services, we found that, you know, it's much broader than that in our current client set.
But it's not a bad one to have your heritage from, because it's obviously a highly regulated industry. Yeah. So I guess in a way you've kind of built your platform from, you know, kind of like the worst case scenario, I guess.
Yeah. It's also a very conservative place to have come from as well. Most of our banking clients, while they're adhering to the same regulations as each other in each country, they are a little more conservative than some of our other clients who are sort of adjacent. And so what that means for our rules is that when we're deploying a piece of risk detection for someone, the baseline is more conservative, which means you're likely it will, when we're doing that optimization and getting the rules performant to that level that is appropriate for the client project, it will pick up more things that are safe rather than less things that are risky, if that makes sense. So we want to make sure that we're setting the baseline to be a little more conservative in the first instance, because we want to make sure that the people are feeling really confident that we pick up everything. And so things that are at the lower end of the risky spectrum, we can dial that up, but we want to make sure that everyone's feeling really confident with the amount, the breadth of what type of content the platform will assess.
Yeah.
So coming from a conservative place can sometimes give that some interesting perspective.
Yeah. But as you say, that's then a matter of kind of growing that in terms of looking at compliance, not just in terms of legislation, but in terms of the profile of the organisation or, if you like, decision-making individuals that you're working with. So it's a fascinating platform. I mean, thank you so much for an amazing demo. Really, really interesting, and you know, can really see how it can significantly reduce time in terms of looking at, and I think it was a point that you made, Mark, or perhaps you, Claire, but just, you know, you can see a growing number of communications where it's just going to be almost impossible to have the depth and breadth of coverage on all of those on a human basis, or it won't be cost effective because you'll need too many humans to be doing it. So something like this really is amazing. So thank you again. Claire's just popped up there the contact details for herself and for Mark, and obviously they will be available with the recording of this as well. So thank you again, Claire and Mark. Really, really delighted. Thank you everyone for attending. Really great to have you back again today, as it always is. As you know, the Legal Techy Tuesday series from the Centre is focused on bringing these sorts of virtual demos to you at home, perhaps at the moment, or in the office, and over a cup of tea, coffee, or lunch, so that it is very user-friendly for you, and you have the opportunity to see just the sort of amazing tech like this that's out there. So we'll have a bunch more Legal Techy Tuesday demos, virtual demos coming your way in June. So do watch out on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook, where you'll see the announcements, obviously, for all of this. So again, Claire and Mark, thank you very much for your time today. Thank you for showing us this amazing product. And to all of you in this session, thanks very much again for attending. And we look forward to welcoming you back next time. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Terry.
Thanks, Terry.